Hey everybody. So I know that some of you couldn't make it to training hangout yesterday, Sunday. So I wanted to make a quick video and talk to you about what we discussed. I know most of us see each other either online or in person, but this just seems the easiest way to get it out there. So first things first, it's good to have a video that I think people will actually watch, unlike my classes. But the three things that really came up, then they're all related, yesterday were Monroe's motivated sequence and how there's sort of a gap. We thought people didn't know it before, but now it seems even worse. People are just befuddled by what this is and how it might work. And like Hannah noted, she feels more like a teacher now instead of a consultant because people don't understand what's happening. So we're going to talk about that for just a minute. We will talk about other formats that you can use, and then we will talk about a problem with people turning their cameras on or not. So let's actually address that in reverse order. So the thing about cameras, if a client doesn't want to turn their camera on, there's really nothing we can do to force them to do that. We can't say like, we're not going to help you if you don't. But I think that it is fine to ask them if they will turn the camera on. Now, sure, if they come in and they don't have it on, we could imply or infer rather that that means they don't want it or it doesn't work. But I think it's completely fine to say something like, "Hey, so I know your camera's not on, but it will make my job easier, or it will allow me to better help you if you turn that on." And I think it really will because then you can sort of make the connection better. You can see their nonverbal cues if they're understanding something or not. You can see if they're thinking instead of just they can lose their connection and you don't know that they're missing. So I think there's a lot of benefit, and I encourage you to ask them to turn it on. But if they say they'd rather not or no, it's don't fight them on it. That's related to that was something about the rapport building and how it's tough to do in an online environment. And it is. I mean, there's not really an easy way around that. But just remember the key things for me are that we don't try to completely overhaul the way that we try to build rapport because it's largely the same as it is in person if you're here in the lab. So, the weather, how's your semester going so far? How are you getting through the pandemic? Those sorts of small talk questions, even though the pandemic's not so small, are still the same way that you would do it. It's just going to be a little different. And last on this point, and Janine brought this up, and it's, I think, a good point to bring up as well, that collaboration is sort of this back and forth. And if you talk at the same time on Google Meet or Zoom or whatever, it sort of mutes the other person and only one person is heard, but you're never really sure if they heard you or if you only heard them. You've been there, you've done that. So, my advice on that is to be the person in the partnership here, you and the client, you be the person that's aware of that and sort of gives your best effort to make sure that you're letting them speak. Now, if there comes a time when you need to get something in and you don't want to simply interject it because you're afraid it might not work or it'll come across wrong, you could always just do something non-verbally. Hopefully, if they don't have their camera on, hopefully they will. But if they don't, they'll at least be looking at you. So you might just kind of put up your hand or give them a non-verbal. I, I wouldn't quite do it like that, but something that lets them know that you need to interject something and get it in. But overall, let them sort of lead it. I know that it's weird because of timing and trying to get it all in and not feeling like you're going to let them run the whole show, but do your best with that. All right, so that's the idea with cameras being on or off for the client. The second idea here was, again in reverse order, what if students don't want to use Monroe's motivated sequence? That's fine. In fact, as you know, some professors don't want their students to use Monroe's, or they've given them something specific to use that's not Monroe's. Remember, our thinking with Monroe's is if there is nothing that's required of them in terms of a format, Monroe's is a nice go to because it is so effective. But if their professor, for example, Lori Yeager, doesn't love Monroe's, maybe you don't push them very hard in that direction. Now, again, if it's a speech that will easily fit into that format, and there's not a rule against it, then do it by all means. But if it's something they're not really comfortable with, that's okay. We have other options. So we can use something like, by the way, this is the Jamboard, and we have these handy dandy writing tablets now too. So you could do, let me try my best with this. Of course, you're not going to work. There we go. Could do a problem solution setup. And if you think about it, the problem solution is a lot like Monroe's, and this is going to be the need, and this one will be the satisfaction. And you could cut it there and do a problem solution. In fact, some professors may want them to do that. But if they like 3 points like we do, we could also add in the sort of a pro con. And that is largely like the visualization. This is difficult to do when you're not used to it. So you could do a problem solution speech, you could do a problem solution, and then a pro con, which remember the pro con is evaluating the plan or the solution here. So that's what that would look like. You could, instead of going with that third main point, you could insert one here and do the problem, cause, and solution, which is where you would basically blame someone for the problem. The thing with all of these is to remember, just like in Monroe's, you have to be detailed. So with the problem, just like Monroe's, it's not enough to say global warming is a problem. Even though we mostly all agree on that, we need to get into the details of why it's a problem, who it's a problem for, how bad the problem is, that kind of stuff. Then for the blame here, the cause of the problem, or who's to blame, what's to blame, go into some depth on that too. Normally, what you'll find is that there's not one single cause for much of anything. So for global warming, the obvious might be greenhouse gases are the cause. Well, that's a cause. It could be the primary cause, but there are others. And so what I would advise you to tell the student is that you're choosing to focus on one of the causes and then justify that. So there's others. There's natural warming and cooling of the earth. There is things like animal waste and farts, for lack of a better term. But then we could get into the human greenhouse gases, and then we could even get more specific and talk about coal burning, and then we could get even more specific and talk about coal burning for energy production as opposed to like heating or cooking. So again, try to get them narrowed, but then justify why that is their choice. So if they went that direction with coal for energy, like creating electricity, you could say this is the reason that I chose this as the main cause, though there are many others, is because this is the one that I feel like if we fix, we could make the biggest impact. And here's my plan, right? So that's the idea. As long as you have a little more meat on the bone than just, yep, it's a problem, let's move on. Who's to blame for it? Well, we are as humans. So what are we going to do? We're going to quit putting out greenhouse gas. Again, it doesn't work quite that easily. Now, having said that, let's erase the board here. We can still also use Monroe's, and that's the third thing. And I know that all of you are familiar with Monroe's. However, in our rooms here, we've got Monroe's on the wall. There it is. And so we can just reference it quickly. If you aren't that familiar with it, or you're not that comfortable with it, or you've forgotten because you haven't used it in a hot minute, well, now is the time to really get that back down under control, because all the speeches, for the most part now in public speaking courses, will be persuasive. So we're going to see a lot of Monroe's. And remember, my students are required to use Monroe's. So what I want you to do, I'm not going to do a full-on review of Monroe's necessarily, but I will highlight some things that were brought up yesterday. And One is that students are just a little less than clear that there are 5 steps, what those steps are, and what they do. So we need to make sure that we're clear that the attention is the attention getter, right? It needs to be something effective. Stories are great. The second step is the need or the problem. Again, detail on why it's a problem, who it's a problem for, etc., etc. Third step is going to be the satisfaction for the need or the solution to the problem. Again, this is step by step. So I know there's 5 steps in Monroe's, but within this number 3 item, the plan, the solution, the satisfaction, there needs to be step by step instructions for solving the problem or satisfying the need. Right, so don't forget that the student goes into some depth with that. The fourth item on Monroe's is visualization. And again, remind them that this doesn't have much to do with visual aids or actual imagery. It's more of a verbal description of how things will change once the need is satisfied using your specific plan. And then the call to action, we're going to come back in just a second to visualization. But the call to action, remember, needs to be 2 things. It needs to be immediate, something that the audience can do now, and it needs to be reasonable. So not donate $100 or go volunteer your time in India or whatever it is. It needs to be something that's very doable for your audience right now. That's the key things to remember. I think Victor brought up that it's getting a little old when you just say, okay, go sign the petition. And I get that. That is one thing that is easy to do, for a policy change sort of argument. But you could have folks call their representatives. You could have them just simply go to a website and learn more information about a topic. And the key thing to remember there is that the student, the client, should have, if they're using a PowerPoint slide especially, the website on the slide so that we can see what it looks like. We can see the address clearly, that kind of thing. And then the audience can understand better what they're to do. Now, before we got one more thing that I really want to stress at the end here, but let me flip back over to this for just a minute. And again, this is something that I think we all know, but I just want to make sure. So let's say over here we've got the problem, and then over here, whoops, my pen's going crazy. We've got visualization. Okay, so let's say the problem is global warming, right? That's our big problem. So what are the specific problems that come from that? So maybe we say water levels. So as ice melts, the water levels rise. So for example, last year was relatively dry in Michigan, but Lake Michigan's at its deepest point ever because of global warming. So we could do water levels. We could have, we'll call it shore erosion. So now your beach house is about to become a water house because the water is just going to keep creeping up. And then that can lead to, let's say, crop failures. Okay. Now, your solution should be, of course, here in the middle. And this could be, let's say, reduce greenhouse gases. And here's how we're going to do it. So you talk about, one, we're going to make a new law. And then that's going to tell us that there's got to be a cap on how much can be emitted. And whatever is emitted needs to be heavily filtered. And then you're going to tell us that, it's going to cost some money, but it's worth it, etc., etc. So whatever this turns out to be, what you should be able to do here, when you think of the problem relating to the visualization, is draw straight lines over. And this is now the visualization. So water levels, those won't be an issue anymore. So what does that mean? Okay, so we're going to stop the rise. And that's great because we're not going to see things like shore erosion. So it's not an issue. And crop failures, means we can continue to, do important things like eat, um, feed the world, that kind of thing. All right. So the big takeaway that I want to get across to you here is simply this: whatever your problem is, make sure that the solution fixes all of it. And for the visualization, make sure that you can restate the problem, but from a different sort of position, right now that you have fixed it. So the last thing that I want to tell you, and this is a little bit of homework for you. I know we have a lot of downtime right now, and we're all using cameras in some ways, of course. So we've all got access to this thing. So here's what I want you to do. Hannah brought up that again, she's feeling more like a teacher instead of a consultant, and it's true. I mean, it's to be expected to some degree. So what we need to do is for everyone to have a very clear way that they are teaching, for lack of a better term, Monroe's motivated sequence. And for me, the best way to do that is through examples. And so I want everyone here it is, your homework. Make a 5 minute, close, plus minus, um, video that one explains what Monroe's motivated sequence is and the steps and what they do, and two gives an example of how this might work. There's no wrong thing for you to use as your example, but instead of using a different example every time and say, well, think about, and then you start looking around the room for an object that you could use. Okay, so podiums, I don't know, whatever's in there. I want you to have a set example that's your go to example. Because while it might sound repetitious to you, you're going to have a number of different clients. And so it's not going to get old to them. So come up with that. And again, in 5 minutes total, you'll walk us through what Monroe's is. Here are the 5 parts. Here's what they do. And here's an example of how that might look. And now I don't want you to just give sort of a speech. I want you to do it in a way that shows sort of how you would give the speech, but then pauses between items to show how they relate to each other and how each one's doing its job. Okay, so that's the idea. I would really like to get those back. Let's see, today's Monday. Let's get them in by next Monday. So that would be a week from today. Don't ask me, I don't know. And so have those back in. I'll post the date on the post that I actually use for this video on Facebook. So look there and get that in. Otherwise, I don't know what that was. I will talk to you soon. If you have questions, make sure to ask me or Janine or Hannah or whoever, and we'll make sure that we get this done. Last thing, let me say a big thank you again for being flexible, getting through the semester. It's strange times. Hopefully things will get somewhat normal soon, though I don't think they will for winter. I think they're just going to be as strange or stranger. But hang in there. If there's anything I can do for you, lab related, school related, personal, whatever, let me know. Remember, we're a family, and that doesn't change just because of some pandemic, not letting us see each other on the regular. So, again, let me know what I can do. Let me know if you have questions. Take care. Thank you, and I will talk to you soon.